Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have another brand new Mattel Jurassic World Dino Trackers release, and this time we've got maybe one of the most anticipated overall. We have the gigantic Trackers Elasmosaurus. And this definitely looks like a fantastic release from Mattel. Definitely a really cool species of marine reptile, and without question, besides the Mosasaurus, the biggest marine reptile that we've had so far, definitely has some pretty good size to it. And you can see the packaging, as usual, is pretty much what it usually is. Pretty much looks the same as always. We, of course, have the Elasmosaurus here. You can see very nicely on the front there. And you can see some images here on the back showing the figure off, and of course the action feature, and also showing the Bistahieversur, which is the other figure that's in this line, which I will also have up for review very, very soon. So let's pop this open and check it out. So we've got the tracking gear, which will go on our Elasmosaurus here at some point, and then our Elasmosaurus itself, and again, it is definitely quite sizable. What a beauty of a figure here. And man, that is absolutely awesome. I love that you can do this with the Mattel figures that have flippers and stuff, where you can kind of stand them up so they actually pose pretty nicely, where you can actually display them. But that thing is absolutely incredible. The sculpt looks really, really nice, but the paint job is probably one of the best I've seen from Mattel so far, and that's something that you can say quite often for their marine reptiles. Like, they do a pretty good job when it comes to the paint schemes and paint applications of their marine reptiles. This one, again, has that fully painted look to it, which I absolutely love. So, just like always, without further ado, let's jump to a closer look at it right now. So, starting up here at the head sculpt of our Elasmosaurus, you can see the scale detail looks really cool. We have very large, kind of rough and rugged looking scale detail up here on the face of the Elasmosaurus. We also have a beautiful light blue tone for the majority of the body color, but you can see this kind of darker blue leak through and lead through the face, through the eye socket toward the snout. And you can also see the eye is painted with a very nice tone of color, as well as given a nice black pupil, and it's perfectly placed. Also sports a nice gloss coat to it. So everything here on the face, in my opinion, looks awesome. We do also have an articulated jaw, as always. You can see the teeth are sculpted in a way that they have an interlocking aspect to them, which is kind of what I would expect for this type of figure. And then you can see, once we open it up, the tongue is sculpted there on the inside of the mouth, given a really nice kind of a pinkish tone. We actually don't have color there for the upper side of the inside of the mouth, but the tongue has a nice gloss coat to it as well. And all of the teeth are sculpted very nicely, painted very nicely, kind of with like a light gray, so we don't have that, that really bright white sort of appearance. Definitely has a nice realistic appearance to the teeth, and again, very precise, very careful paintwork. Same deal for this side of the head. You can again see that the eye is painted beautifully. As we begin to lead back here into the neck, you can see the skin texture gets a lot smaller, a lot finer as you move back. You've got some nice creasing right here back behind the head. You can also see we have a white coloration for the lower jaw, and that coloration does run down here into the underside of the throat and runs along a large portion of the underside of the figure. You can see some larger scaling here moving along the upper side of the Elasmosaurus, kind of running down along the spinal column with some larger scales sort of trailing out. You can see more of that dark blue leading up here, kind of designing up here to the top and then running back down here into the side of the face, and then again leading up through the eye socket and stuff. And you can see that there's kind of like some straggling areas of it. It's just kind of like really splotchy with the way it's applied, just kind of splattered all over the place, and it looks really, really cool. I also like that I can see that we have that kind of thing that Mattel's been doing, where they sort of have like different colorations sort of mixed into the material when it's made. You kind of see it a little bit right there, and I have noticed it like back here on the flippers. You can see it a little bit more there, so that is abundant through the course of the figure. As you move down the neck, you can see a really cool style to the scale detail. Looks very, very reptilian, very lizard-like, or even snake-like, I would say. But as you move down from the side of the neck up into the back, the style of scale detail and skin texture changes completely to a very different looking scaling, which is again a pretty cool look for this figure. You can see again those big clusters of larger scales moving down along the spinal column. You see more of that darker blue tone here leading along pretty much right there at the border between the light blue and then the white underbelly. And then as we continue to move down, you see it lead down here toward the front flipper. And then as you move out into the flipper, we have, again, a similar style to the scale detail to what we had seen moving along the upper side of the Elasmosaurus. We have like larger scales leading out here, but then just a big variation of kind of bumpy looking scales moving through the course of the flipper, and that looks really cool. You can also take notice to the front flipper being the same kind of darker blue tone that we see there leading down, which is pretty cool. And of course you have articulation with the flipper, which you can move all over the place, forward, back, and then of course out away from the body, and it does go pretty high, which is pretty cool. So you can, create all sorts of movements and all sorts of dioramas and displays for the figure. But as you move through the course of the body, you see a little bit more kind of creasing right there, a little bit more back here behind the flipper as you lead back into the stomach, and the majority of the body all has that same similar style of kind of like bumpy scaling once you actually get down here into the body and you leave the neck region. But again, those larger bumpier scales moving along the upper side. We do have an area of this light tone that shows up here in the back and just kind of splatters everywhere here as you move back, and then it just starts to kind of begin to mesh with this very darker blue here that is definitely a much darker blue than we see up here. But it looks really cool, and as you lead out into the tail, you have almost like this sort of fin-like appearance to the end of the tail, which is really neat. You can see a nice curve to the tail. As you lead down into the flipper, you can again see the same style of scale detail, same style of skin texture to the rear flipper as we had seen on the front flipper. And of course, same deal as far as the articulation goes, forward and back and out away from the body, and then down, of course. And that's really about it as far as articulation goes outside of the neck, because the neck does have an action feature to it, which allows the neck to move basically only to the left. It doesn't go to the right at all. But as far as the Jurassic Facts app goes, if you would like to add the Elasmosaurus to your collection, there it is. And then if we take a look again at the body here, on the other side, you can see, again, pretty much the same thing, nothing really all that different, any more so than we had seen on the initial side here on this side. You can see, though, that this light tone leads along the underside, but once it, gets past the initial set of flippers, you see it tapers away. It is a very smooth transition as it moves away, and the detailing here on the underside also looks really nice, really crisp. You have that gorgeous scaling here as you move through. Very different style of scaling here on the underside is what we had seen through the majority of the body, and you see that darker tone again showing up here out on the end of the tail. And then of course, if we move these flippers out and not turn them, you can see the undersides of the flippers all look pretty much the same as we had seen on the upper side, just a little bit less as far as these larger scales, I would say, on the underside compared to what we see on the upper side. But this thing is absolutely awesome. I am so in love with this. I would say that this is probably my new favorite when it comes to marine reptiles from Mattel. This thing is just super, super cool. And then we have the tracking gear here as well, and you can see it's basically just painted with a dark brown. There's not a whole lot else going on with it. There is a nice, kind of a strap here where you can sort of buckle it up around our Elasmosaurus, but it does sport some nice looking detail to it, and has a pretty cool appearance to it as a whole. Also is very, very flexible, like super, super flexible. So we will throw this here on the Elasmosaurus in a moment, but first let's check out the action features. So our buttons, we actually have two, one on each side here of the spinal column. So we'll push the one on the left-hand side first, and you can see the mouth opens up as we lead to the left. If we look at it from the front, you can see how it turns to the animal's left. But we also have one over here on the other side. Okay, so that one goes in a downward position and also again has that kind of jaw snapping action feature, which you can yet again see from the front. Definitely really cool. Pretty much exactly what you would want when it comes to an Elasmosaurus toy like this. You would definitely want an action feature like that. If we go ahead and get a size, I think the best way to kind of get a size would be to kind of sprawl it out here a little bit, and then we'll get a very nice length on our Elasmosaurus. But for a length, you are looking at, and it is quite large, that's for sure, I would say honestly about 15 inches or about 38 centimeters. Now, height-wise, that would really be dependent on how you pose it. Like if we put it in this position there, if it's laying down, we just kind of set it here, you're looking at about right around 4¼ inches or 11 centimeters. But if we actually positioned it up where it was, standing on the flippers like we had it initially, it would be really quite tall. So that's really dependent on how you position your Elasmosaurus. But let's go ahead and get the tracking gear on quick, and we'll check it out from there. And there we go. And it actually looks really cool with the tracking gear on it. Of course, that tracking gear reminds me of like Kenner Jurassic Park. Even though they had capture gear rather than tracking gear, I think this is on correctly. I'm not entirely sure. It looks a little bit weird. But it looks super cool with it on because, again, it does give me, even if it is tracking gear over capture gear, it still gives me that, classic Kenner feel, if you ask me. But as far as a size comparison goes, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line next to our Elasmosaurus. And you can see it sports a pretty impressive size. Definitely a big figure. And, being one of the gigantic trackers, you usually expect them to be pretty big, but this Elasmosaurus has absolutely exceeded even my expectations as far as how large I thought it would be. And then to further show you that, here is the Elasmosaurus next to a Parasaurolophus from the Hammond collection to, again, show you how large it is. Like, the Hammond collection Parasaurolophus is a pretty big figure, so that really shows you how impressive the Elasmosaurus is here next to it. Then we have a comparison next to the Gigant Spinosaurus, a Strike Attack figure to help give you an idea of the size next to one of those. We've also got a Scorpiovinator, so this is kind of like the Wild Roar, Roarovore size range, just kind of trying to cover a few different size ranges of Mattel figures you might have in your collection to give you an idea of the size. We've also got a Mattel Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus here next to our Elasmosaurus to continue to show you again how large this is. And then going super obscure, we actually have the Hasbro Carnoraptor, just in case it's a figure you might have in your collection, one that I felt like would be pretty fun to bring in for a comparison next to the Elasmosaurus. And then for one final comparison, we have an Extreme Damage Tyrannosaurus Rex next to the Elasmosaurus to again show you that this thing is definitely pretty big. You can see if we look at it lengthwise, actually I guess we should move the Rex further up, but if you look at it lengthwise with the Rex, it's obviously a bit shorter, but, considering it has this impressive of a size next to one of the Mattel Tyrannosaurs, I would say that shows you that the Elasmosaurus is easily, again, outside of the Mosasaurus, the largest marine reptile we've had from Mattel so far. I also actually just realized that there's another area of articulation. We can swivel this area here as well, which isn't the greatest area of articulation, but, it's just another spot that I failed to mention prior. So this brand new Mattel Jurassic World Dino Tracker's gigantic tracker Elasmosaurus is phenomenal, and definitely something that I am super happy to have released by Mattel and now in my collection. Probably one of the most anticipated releases from Mattel for me that was coming out. Like, I was just so unbelievably hyped for this Elasmosaurus and absolutely could not wait to get this in my hands and check it out. I was almost like a kid at Christmas today waiting for it to arrive just so I could check it out and get a look at this Elasmosaurus. And to be honest, it absolutely does not disappoint and has, I would say, exceeded my expectations. Like, it is gorgeous. The sculpt is super highly detailed, very, very nice, very vibrant detail throughout. Maybe one of the nicest sculpts that I've seen from Mattel so far. And I do say that quite often, but that's because they keep raising the bar. They keep giving us better and more impressive sculpts all the time. And I would say that the paint job as well is probably one of the nicest I've seen from Mattel. There are a lot of different variations of colors at play here on this, and just like a lot of color through the entire body. Like, there's not any area, in my opinion, that looks unpainted. Everything looks like it's a fully painted figure, which we can't always say when it comes to a Mattel release, so that is another massive plus for this figure, is the fact that it does have that fully painted, very high quality feel. And on top of that, you've got articulation, which is always really cool. I love having articulation on my figures, and it all works very nice and very smoothly. And on top of that, you've also got some pretty darn cool action features, and I think both action features work nicely. They're nothing revolutionary, nothing amazing that, you need to run home and tell your family about, but it is still a really cool action feature, and it does have two different versions of it, and it works perfectly as well. So I think as a whole, this is a win for sure when it comes to Mattel, and an absolute must-have if you are a Mattel collector. So if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to where I purchased mine on Amazon. So make sure you check that link, go grab yourself this awesome Elasmosaurus, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.